So in this past week, my direct report called me condescending. And I didn't know what to take of it. Like, I take pride in myself as a leader and as a manager because the person before him, I helped her get promoted. She did such an excellent job with her role as a receptionist, being welcoming and taking inventory of all the things. And I helped her get good relationships with the people in finance. And that eventually led her to get promoted and now working as an accountant. And this new person came in. And so it was just 3 months. And I just wanted to touch base with him. I wanted to see how he was doing with the company, with himself, and in this role, and just see where he's at. So informally, I asked him what he was most proud of, what can I work on better as his manager, and where he wants to move forward. And so he was really proud of helping us plan this offsite for all the VPs and directors. And I have to give him props because he did such an excellent job on that. But by the time we had to hit what should I improve on as his manager, I was like, oh no, here comes the criticism. And that was where he was like, well, at first, I really thought you were condescending. And that really hit me because I did not want to make him feel that way. I wanted to make him feel empowered to be the best that he can be. I empowered the person before him, and I just couldn't empower him now. So there's some ideas that I've been brewing about that I want to share in this video just on who I am as a leader. And hopefully you can take these lessons too and bring it to your own personal life to become a better leader as well. So the first idea I have is just not holding others the same standard I have and hold against myself. So I really value excellence. I believe in doing the best that I possibly can. So when I was first hired into this organization, I was actually in his shoes. I was an administrative assistant working at the front desk. It was actually during COVID time. So part of my responsibility was scanning people's foreheads with a thermometer and checking their temperature to make sure they didn't have COVID or the flu or whatever sickness. And I was also taking inventory. I kept inventory, I managed our snacks, and talked to different vendors and built relationships with them. So something that inspired me was this book called Relentless by Tim Grover. I bought it because I'm a huge basketball fan. The author is actually Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan's personal trainer. And he had a very close insight to see how champions' minds worked. And in Relentless, it just talked about having this relentless work ethic, that you had to show up every day, put in the work, put in extra work, and continue to do that and carry on moving it forward. The job is never going to be finished. And I put in the hours. Not only did I just complete my responsibilities, I then bought another book called The Leader Assistant just to help me as a leader. It was a book on how to be an effective and game-changing executive assistant, although I was administrative assistant at the time. There weren't that many resources for that, but that book was really a hand manual for me to succeed. And through that book, there was this online community as well that I was able to have access. So I asked for a lot of advice from other executive assistants on how to succeed. Around 6 months in, the VP of Business Development asked me to help manage his calendar. And I was like, oh shoot, like another responsibility that I get to be close with this guy, I gotta do it. So by the time that opportunity came, I felt ready. I've never managed calendars before, but I read books on how to manage it. And with that, I was able to transition to being his assistant. And around 2 years in, when the opportunity came up for me to finally become executive assistant I took it. The general manager and my new boss right now, he took notice of me. He saw the work ethic that I was doing. He saw what I was doing for other people, and he knew that he wanted to do that for himself. And so that opening came and I took it, and I thought the transition was smooth, that there were more responsibilities, but I was so prepared because I saw everything coming and I was ready to kill it. Part of what makes a successful EA is just having that sharp attention to detail. And I have that. I'm a killer when it comes to that. When I'm preparing his talks, I make sure that he's standing in the right spot to get the best acoustic sound and to be standing where he can be most seen as well and heard and help him just look the best that he can in front of his people. So I have that relentlessness, that work ethic, that drive. It took me to where I am today. But I do believe part of that turned me into a hard ass. When I talk to my new direct report, I come across as too direct and too straightforward and too blunt. And I think part of that's just my efficiency in who I am as a person. I want to say the least amount of words as possible so I can get my message across. So I asked him, like, when did you feel condescending? Can you give me an example? And he just gave me this moment of, like, whenever I ask him a question, I always just say yes and the reason why, but that's it. Do you know who runs the facilities budget? And I'm like, oh, it's him. And that's kind of it. And I think it's just me being too direct. And I just had to be cautious of that when I'm communicating with him, because he's still new. He's still new in this corporate world and this corporate environment. And I think just me being so well versed in the corporate environment now, it's just turned me into a hard ass. And I just got to be careful of that. The next lesson I have is just learning to be vulnerable. So whenever we meet for our one-on-ones, he always starts off with, how's my weekend going? And we share just how our personal lives are. So most of the time I say, oh, my weekend's pretty good. And then I kind of leave it at that. I haven't found too much of a reason to share much of my personal life in my work. I've always tried to connect things that aren't too personal with other people, like sports or other interests, but nothing on how my relationships are going or how my emotions are. And he would be very vulnerable and just share like he was having a terrible weekend. And there would be times it just feels like a therapy session. And I just have to be cautious of that he is pouring out his emotions for me because he wants connection. And there was this powerful TED Talk done by this psychologist and researcher named Brené Brown. She talked about the power of vulnerability, especially vulnerability coming from leaders. Vulnerability is the bridge for that connection. A lot of people are just missing that connection because they want to feel like they belong. Especially for this guy who was 3 months in the company, he wanted to feel like he belonged because he did a good job and he was a cool person. And Brené Brown continued to share that vulnerability is what makes people beautiful. That when you become vulnerable, you're willing to invest in an area where there's no guarantee for results. Because when you become vulnerable, you're sharing a part of yourself that can be shot down. And we're all imperfect, especially in our vulnerabilities as well. But it's because of our imperfections that we get a chance to connect with each other. So it's for me as a leader, my responsibility. I have to be vulnerable with him. I have to share what's going on in my mind and just build that connection for him. So whenever he asks me about my weekend, I really got to tell him what's going on, or that I had a fight with my mom the other day. And I gotta be willing to share that things weren't that good. And it's hard. It's hard opening up because corporate life made me such a hard ass, because I'm so worried about my vulnerabilities being used as an advantage over me that I just got to keep myself sheltered and put my walls up. And it's hard to let my walls down, but I need to do it because he lets his walls down for me. And that's just something I've been thinking about as a leader. So the next idea I have is not seeing people as a means to an end. So me and my direct report, we don't have too much of an age gap. I'm 4 years older than him. When I was a senior in high school, he was just a freshman. And that's crazy. But now that he's working beneath me, there is a hierarchy that comes in the organization, in the corporate world. I have power over him. I have the power to cut his contract and essentially end his income. And that's crazy for me to think about. So his words come with caution and my words are taken with much more value because of this power dynamic. And I just have to think about my relationship with my executive too, because he holds that same power over me. Yet I've seen him do so many wonderful things for other people. He comes with this humility of serving others. And I need to emulate that as well. And one great example of I seen that recently was in this book called Love Does by Bob Goff. So Bob Goff is a motivational speaker, and he was on his way to a conference to give a talk in Orlando, Florida. When he arrived at the airport in Florida, he was surprised to find out that someone ordered a limo for him. He was gonna take an Uber, but they already ordered a limo for him, so he figured, why not just take it? So he goes in the back of the limo and he's chit-chatting with the limo driver, and he's like, hey, yeah, how long have you been driving limos? He's like, 40 years. And oh, okay. And he's like, this is actually gonna be my last drive ever. I'm about to retire. And Bob Goff was like, oh shoot, that's amazing. And then he asks him, have you ever been in the back of a limo before? And the driver was like, no, I haven't. And so Bob Goff was like, pull over right now. We're gonna switch. And he pulls over and they switch, and Bob Goff drives the limo driver to the conference where he was going. And so it's just this cool moment of this power dynamic being switched, of Bob Goff, the customer, coming down to serve the driver who's never been driven like that before. That the driver of his 40 years of experience has given people such an amazing experience, he never got it for himself. And that's something I need to think about. I've seen in my executive, he is willing to step down and wash dishes, change tires, and empower other people in that way. Although he is the general manager, so it's my job as executive assistant to help him think about the long-term strategic stuff for the company. Most people can change a tire, so I can do that for him instead. So when it comes to my direct report, I need to think about that too. I need to be more compassionate when it comes to him, and even stepping down from this pedestal that I'm on so that I can lift him up and empower him. So the lesson for me is I can't see people as a means to an end. I have to see them as people. That even though he is my employee, he is also a human being that has needs and is just looking for connection. And the last idea that I have is just not letting this flaw control me. So I'm quite a perfectionist, and you can kind of see it in everything I do, especially when it comes to efficiency. I want everything to run smoothly, and that includes myself and the standard I hold over myself. And when it comes to this one little flaw over this one little comment, it's just hard to get it out of my head. I'm overlooking the 99 other great things that make me a great leader. And this 1 out of 100 comment is pissing me off. I want to correct it. I want to improve it because I get a chance to be a better leader because of it. And one of my favorite books is called Every Good Endeavor by Timothy Keller. And in that book, he talks about how most people, they put their identity or their sense of worth into their work. So I come from the Silicon Valley, and I see this almost everywhere. People in the Silicon Valley will come up to you, and their very first question is, so what do you do? And when they mean that, they really mean like, what's your occupation? Oh, I'm a software engineer at Google. Oh, I'm a mechanical engineer at Tesla. And they really put their identities into these big organizations for clout. And by the time that these tech layoffs hit, their whole world comes crashing down. Not only is their source of income is just cut off, their just sense of worth is gone, that they've lost their purpose, and it's really hard to find meaning again. So for me, I'm so fortunate to still have my job during those mass tech layoffs, and I'm just very fortunate to be in a place where I am today. But even then, I still put my value into my work, that I pride excellence and leadership. So when I find this one criticism that it isn't as strong as it was, I take offense to it. And it's just something for me to think about, that my sense of worth should not be into my work. I'm a human being, I'm a brother, I'm a son and a friend, and I'm so much more than that. And I can't let that bring me down, because I've done 99 other things that are right, and this one thing that I did wrong, it can't bring me down. So I have to put my sense of identity into who I am as a human being and not into my work. So these are some ideas that I've been thinking about as I just reflect on my own leadership. And I hope that you can take away too, that you don't have to hold others to the same standard that you hold yourself. You can be vulnerable to build that connection with other people around you, not see people as a means to an end, but really see them as human beings, and putting your sense of worth into who you are as a human being and not into your work. So thank you so much for listening. If you really enjoyed these type of videos, you can click here to view my latest video on my most recent trip to Peru and what it taught me about life. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.